Howdy of you delicious people. I'm here today to review episode 2 of The Defenders. Really I was going on and thinking and contemplating about combining both episode 2 and 3 together, because episode 2 is only 44 some odd minutes. But then also when realizing it, I was like, well, right after I'm to finish up with this video, I'm to have to do 3 more after this. So I'm just like, yeah, let's just go on and do this video, wrap this bad boy up quickly, because there are other stuff that I need to get to, which eventually will be the season 2, episode 1 of Superman Lois, a number of brand new stuff that is just busting out within the next day or two. We got Eternals coming out tomorrow. We've got Peacemaker. I think the John Cena John Cena show is coming out tomorrow. There's a lot of stuff just kind of bursting out, so that's great. Gives me more things to just cover at some point in time here. But I'm going to also keep trying to plug away at Defenders because it's a really interesting series. So here's the one thing that I get into this episode and I start to realize, and it's hard for me to want to say this just because I overall like this actress. But here's my question. What is the point of Sigourney Weaver on this show? What is the actual point of this character? We have it where, Kingpin gets his hands dirty, and you could justify Kingpin being on the show. But really, for me, I can't, already out of 2 episodes, I can't justify Alexander Reed being thoroughly used in the show and used for any kind of real legitimate benefit. No offense to Sigourney Weaver, it's just, they are not really having her much do besides just go on and haggle with Madame Gao in this episode. And what is she really doing? Yeah, she's the one kind of figuring things out, and it seems like she is to present that she's a very highly intelligent woman. But again, what is she doing on the forefront of her? What is the point of her? To where eventually we just have it to where it seems like possibly by Defenders, that's when we start to maybe have these shows start to fall apart anyways, because Marvel is just like, hey, we want to go and reobtain these shows because it seems like there's some real potential here. And also we're finally kind of brewing up our own streaming service. So yeah, when are you guys just gonna go and stop this whole Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones thing? How about you just kind of muffle all that, because we're gonna go and do our own thing and we're gonna buy back all these characters at some point. So going into this show, going into this episode, we kind of have a lot of certain specific words that are kind of being tossed in this episode, and hopefully I'm going to remember all of them. We of course have both Colleen Wing and Danny going after some sword, which is to be called the Masakato? Sure. They're going after a make of a sword, and they're going and they're trying to find the workshop that is to be able to have these swords, and that is to, of course, be a rare sword to find in this place of New York City, which, not quite understanding why they all have to go to New York City to go on and try to find this blade. Doesn't quite make sense to me, but it is what it is. We, of course, have Jessica Jones, who is to go on and try to figure out this shell company that keeps transferring its assets to a number of places, and she ends up getting more and more frustrated. We go on, we have Luke in this episode who is to go on and need to find a place called Trouble in a Paradise, and we have him also go on and is to find some guy who is to, of course, need a standout kind of gimmick upon himself, but we don't really understand why he's even here in this episode. And so Daredevil is also to go and meet up with Foggy because we have it to where Murdoch here is getting a itchy, like he's getting really itchy to just go on and don himself a suit. So we have it to where there's some kind of backing away from that, talking off the ledge, so to speak. And just like, oh no, don't be the man without fear for a brief time. No. Like, but there eventually is going to have to be forcibly a reason for Matt to go into action here, because of a black sky thing that he has to resolve. So let's go into it. Let's go into that double five, because it's otherwise that time to just go into spoilers about this one. Like this show, I enjoy it. 2 episodes in, and I'm like, man, I can't wait for these guys to get together. And towards the tail end of this episode, we're having that. I'm like, yeah. Just the the Danny and Luke moment was just priceless. When I saw this the first time, I'm like, yeah, like I didn't care about anything else in the show. Like that whole like Danny and Luke Cage moment, I'm like, God, this is so brilliant. This is so great just to have these two kind of get in the mix, so to speak. But we'll talk about more about that in spoilers because this episode is only 44 minutes long. So, with that said, now that I've gone on and basically teed up this episode, let's go and talk about some things that aren't exactly to have been said already. So again, we're going to have to just comb through the Alexandra Reed stuff because that is to be the easiest thing in the world. Because she's barely in this show. She's not the villain behind all of this. She's not doing any heavy lifting. No offense to Sigourney Weaver. I love Sigourney Weaver. Like every time I see her in a show, a movie, I always get excited. I ended up watching, last night I ended up seeing, I saw her in a Tim Allen movie last night. And I'm like, ooh, Sigourney Weaver, with Tim Allen, just kind of mixing it up. And heaven forbid I know what the title of that movie was, but I know it's Tim Allen who had gone into prison and is to be working at some pirate fast food joint. Heaven forbid I know what the name of that is, but probably if you Google Tim Allen in prison movie, then there probably are very few options that pop up. So let's go into it. So we have Alexandra Reed, who goes on to is to have this kind of private audience of her going and picking a certain selection. And we have the person who is to, I guess, be the person behind the music, so to speak, coming to Alexandra Reed and telling her, it's like, well, hey, you must come to a gala at some point. And we have Alexandra's like, no, I love these kind of private sessions. And we have it to where this girl is like, well, you've picked a very interesting piece because of the key choice. And supposedly they rattle off that Beethoven and this other artist, which I forget the name of. We had it to where, I guess, Alexander was to go on and mention that this whole battle between them was to be on purpose because this guy wanted to show that he can do a risky move like Beethoven had did, to just prove that he could also do that same arrangement in that same key and make it sound interesting. And it was a response to what Beethoven had did. And so we of course have this woman who's like, oh my god, like your excellence is just astounding, and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden Madame Gao just kind of pops in and she's like, hey, guess what? We got a problem. Mission impossible. Let's kind of seal the deal on what's really going wrong here. So we go on, we find out that Madame Gao, from the digging that they're doing, they go on and they find that we of course have oh my god, I'm completely forgetting about the name of Kung Lung. Am I saying that? Completely forgot about the name of which that Danny is to come from, because it continues to come into this episode. So evidently they go on to find something that is to be this wall that is to have all these inscriptions and all these things that is to of course be from Kung Lun. And we have it to where Madame Gao is to say that this is a wall, and we have Alexander that's like, no, this isn't a wall, this is just a door, and we have to figure out what the key is for this door, and more than likely that's probably going to have to be either Danny or it's probably going to have to be someone else. Because of course Danny is to be from Kung Lung, and so that makes the most sense here. So really that's all that like Alexander Reed has to do in this whole entire episode. Everything else is just tying on the team up of or just the story more of any number of these characters. So I think let's switch it up instead of going right into the Luke Cage story, because I've already kind of set up that story anyways. I think this time around we're going to go and let's go with, considering it's a real roll of the dice on this one, let's go with Jessica Jones. Because more than likely, like, I first had tried to think that I wanted to have like a Jessica Jones thumbnail for this episode. Then all of a sudden I'm like, well, there's obvious pictures that you have to go for certain episodes. Like, you of course had to go with the first episode of this having some kind of Matt Murdock photo. That makes a lot of sense. But then for the story, you really just have to focus on what's going on with two characters in this episode. We really have to focus on that. So hopefully in another episode, I'm going to go and have a Jessica Jones thumbnail, because like, it feel like I want to kind of really change the number of thumbnails that end up getting put into the show, or into shows, because I know there's a lot of times where there's certain shows where I just go and do one character throughout the whole entire thing, like The Witcher. I just did Henry Cavill. I just plopped him everywhere. So I want to kind of change it up, so that way people are gonna get a like mix up of pictures at some point, but not probably like, oh yeah, well this is the obvious choice to go with. Like, you went with the easy one on this one. Well, of course I did. There's obvious choices. So let's go into it. So Jessica Jones is to go on in this episode, and we have actually Misty Knight being tied into the Jessica Jones story. So we really have to kind of mix and intertwine these characters together. So Misty Knight is to go on to this site of which that Jessica Jones is to find all these explosives. And so we eventually have it to where Jessica Jones is to have made her statement, and now Jessica's like, well, can I leave here? Because I've been here 4 hours. Like, let's go. Like, let me leave here. I need something more to do than just stand around here all fucking day. So they let her go, and all of a sudden Misty is to realize that Jessica is to go and grab like I think a packing list, and Misty is to try to chase after her, but Jessica just kind of gets out of there. Um, I like what they're doing with Hogarth in this episode, because we really have it to where Hogarth is consistently being the character that is to go and talk to Jessica about like keeping her identity secret, keeping her ability secret, because and that's the interesting thing about this story, where it seems like everyone else has kind of been like almost with the exclusion of Matt, like everybody's kind of been outed about their powers. Maybe Danny Rand, maybe not so much, but like I think at least Luke, like everybody knows that he's the bulletproof guy, uh, and he's not hiding who he is. Where like Jessica isn't really hiding who she is, but like we have it to where she also like she's not like promoting it either as much as like Luke Cage is. Uh, so we go on into this episode, into this night, into this whatever. So Jessica is to go on from this paperwork and is desperately trying to find the name of this company. She's going through all of these files, all of this paperwork to just continue to get the runaround. And so she's going through and consistently and consistently getting to this point where she's like, are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Because this company keeps transferring funds or transferring assets over and over and over again. So we have Jessica go and talk to this file clerk, mention it's like, well, hey, like I'm trying to figure out this company's name, and it keeps jumping around all of the gosh darn place, and like it keeps saying that this company just keeps on transferring assets, and I can't figure out who this is. And so we have this file clerk who is saying it's like, well, you need to go and talk to the historian section, uh, and you need to go and get an appointment. And so Jessica Jones is like, well, fine, fan-freaking-tastic. So Jessica Jones is to, of course, try and make an appointment, which is to eventually land her to be arrested by Misty Knight after Jessica Jones is to make it to her place, where all of a sudden Malcolm is to have a gun on him by John Raymond. And so we, of course, have it to where Jessica is telling John here, hey, you better not hurt one hair on that guy, or like I'm going to hurt you worse than you could possibly hurt him, kind of thing. So we go on and we have John, of course, who is so scared that that he's gotten himself involved in this, because he's thinking at some point that someone's going to come for him, that that Jessica doesn't know who they're dealing with. So all of a sudden, we of course have it to where Black Skies make another appearance in this episode, because it seems like if anybody's doing the legwork, it's really just Elektra here. Here's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. Why isn't it just that Elektra Nachos, Black Sky, is just the villain in this story? Why do we need Alexandra Reed, in all honesty? Yeah, we have it to where Black Sky isn't all that rational, coherent, whatever of a being, but like Elektra Nachos is not exactly a, like, she was rich, like she had money. She could be a villain. But, like, I guess she's not rich enough. Like, when really looking at it, supposedly her day job, Electra Natros, was supposed to be, like, a pole dancer or a stripper. Like, that's what the comic books is to lead you to believe. But it seems like they always joke around about that, but they never really go into that in any of the other iteration stories or whatever. But maybe that was probably something they retconned also, because why would they want this girl to consistently be this character? And so on and so forth. So Black Sky goes on and kills Raymond here, and we have it to where, of course, Jessica is trying to fight off Black Sky, and Jessica is to get knocked back. Black Sky is to go and basically be flying down these flights of stairs ridiculously as if she's like the wind. And I'm like, like, we have Black Sky who's just like, Jessica is not going to be able to chase after this girl even though she tries to. And when she makes it all the way down these flights of stairs, Elektra is just gone. So like, I didn't want to, like, in the very first episode, I didn't, like, it wasn't me just purposely just saying, oh, this is only Black Sky, and I don't even know that this was Elektra. I knew it was Elektra the whole time. Like, I knew. It was just me purposely just saying, like, well, this is her villain side of things. This is who she is now. And this episode, I'm like, oh, okay, so, like, now that everybody's like, who is Black Sky? I only know her as Elektra. Or vice versa. Some people don't remember Black Sky, the name, all that well. So now I'm reiterating, like, oh, this is Elektra. But this is a different variation of this character. To where eventually we have Matt, who kind of has to kind of be Elektra's conscience at some point, or kind of being this a reminder of who she was at some point when we really get going in the show. So we go on here to eventually have after this moment, Jessica Jones gets arrested. And here's one thing that I also want to get out of the way, because I forgot about this. So, because of course. So, right after Jessica Jones is to talk about to this one file clerk, that's when we have Hogarth coming in here and telling her to just, like, hey, whatever you're doing, drop it now. Like, feds are getting involved in this. Like, this is to be a high-ranking national case. And Hogarth is wanting Jessica to stop what she's doing simply because we have Hogarth still worried that someone's going to find out about Jessica's power and dissect her and whatever. So it's still that worry. It's weird we don't have that. We still don't have that going on with Luke Cage. Nobody gives a like Luke Cage, sadly, that they don't want to dissect him. And, like, that's what they could have probably been doing in prison, just dissecting the mother. I don't know. They could have gone on and figured out he had superpowers. Hence, within a number of these people, like, we could have had, like, frickin' Danny with his rich family. They could have gone on and just, like, let me siphon off that Iron Fist. And the only thing that I can actually like about the second season of Iron Fist, which by the time that they go in this direction, they can't do anything with it. We end up finding out that Danny, eventually in the second season, like, both of his hands glows, not just the one. But again, that just becomes a waste that they go on and do. It's kind of like a reveal, but it's a waste. Sorry if I'm spoiling that for anybody, but, like, eventually that is being a bound thing to happen. Plus, also, we don't really get the Iron Fist that we 100% wanted out of this Netflix show. We just kind of tease about it, but we never actually go there. We never actually get there. And that what I hope frustrate a lot of people. So, we go on and we, of course, have Hogarth, who goes on and meets up with Foggy later, and Hogarth is telling Foggy, it's like, well, hey, Jessica Jones, like, you need to be, like, watching her like a hawk. Like, if she's chewing bubble gum, I want to know what flavor it is. And so we, of course, have it towards the end of this episode where Jessica is to get cuffed here, and Misty Knight is going on and questioning Jessica Jones. All of a sudden, we have Matt Murdock come in, and he's like, well, hey, I'm Matt Murdock. I'm going to be your attorney here. Like, don't say anything to anybody, and we'll probably get you off. So, and so it's like, yeah, because this is gonna be like the really great team up between both Matt and Jessica. The best part about this show, besides the whole like I really like, of course, the Heroes for Hire team up, but still, like, the hilarity between both Jessica and Murdoch here is just like, oh my god, it's priceless. The priceless banter between these two characters, to where it just equals a very enjoyable show for the next episode. So check that one out when eventually I can freaking get to it, because heaven forbid there's a number of shows and there's a number of movies that eventually I have to kind of plop out, so to speak. Which, not really quite sure if I'm going to get to Eternals like exactly like on the day it actually comes out. Like, I'll probably have to do it the very next day, simply because like with my time schedule, or how I'm kind of doing my sleep schedule right now, more than likely it's going to mean that I'll probably do Eternals very next day, because I think I will cover that. I'm not jazzed about it, but I'll cover it nonetheless. So we go on here, and we of course have it where the priceless Jessica and Matt are teaming up here, and that kind of finishes up this episode. So let's go on and let's talk about Matt, since we talked about him now. So Matt, of course, is going on and is to... we're back to Earthquake now. We're back to supposed Earthquake, which we find out that's all a sham. Oh, I forgot about the Walker moment where Triss is going and calling Jessica Jones. I forgot about that. Let's get to that before we get to the Matt stuff. So Walker's going on and telling or calling Jessica and saying that she's left about like 4 to 18 messages or 19 messages. I don't remember. So she says so many numbers because Walker was to go on and do her podcast, and someone was saying that this was not an earthquake, that an earthquake doesn't quite make sense here, that it has to be some kind of like underground explosion that was to be taking place, that was to make it seem like an earthquake. We have this geologist who is to go on and mention that there has to be a certain kind of number to hit for it to be a legitimate earthquake-like impact, and it did not reach there. All of a sudden, we have this phone number getting cut off. Trish all of a sudden is asking her assistant, hey, what happened with that call? And we have it to her assistant. It's like, well, is saying like, well, the higher ups are telling me that we needed to cut that call, and we needed to stop talking about this earthquake stuff because like there's something possibly that we just can't talk about any longer about this. And so Trish had gone on and just kind of gave an excuse that I guess the earthquakes are also causing a number of phones getting dropped out and signals and whatever. Weird and bizarre things. So Triss is to go on and eventually tell Jessica like what's going on and how this can't possibly be a legitimate earthquake event. As Triss is to try to make it to her podcast and to realize there is a big, huge, massive hole uh, with a car inside of it, just saying like, "Yeah, you're not going to be getting any shortcuts today, there, Missy." So we go on and like, yeah, I think that's the only real legitimate thing that happens in this episode for any of that. Hopefully I didn't forget anything, because I'm sure there will, or sure I will. So let's go on and let's cover the Matt stuff. I love the Matt stuff. It's always fun. So we of course have Matt that goes on and is to, again, earthquake is happening. Evidently the police aren't coming through Hell's Kitchen, so Matt is to have to act to help people, to save people. And so it seems that there's a bunch of people looting, going and stealing big massive TVs and a bunch of other stuff. So it seems that there are people trying to defend their store or their pawn shop from getting robbed, because you end up kind of seeing vaguely like this pawn shop sign that I caught, and I was like, oh, thank God that I could figure out what this was. So we go on and we have a bunch of people stealing TVs and stuff. I can tell simply by the box, instead of actually just saying like, oh, I think it's a TV. No, I could tell by the box. It's a TV. So we go on here and we have Murdoch, who is just trying to take down these guys that are trying to defend their store, but while defending their store, they're shooting people, they're hurting people. And so Matt is to go on and take down these guys. I don't want to call them thugs, because they're not. They're just defending their store. It's the, like, maybe it's not the just thing to do, but like pulling a gun on somebody is never justified anyways. So we have Matt going and beating up these guys, and we of course have one guy who's like, "Who are you?" And I was like, please don't tell him that you're Batman. I know this is Marvel, but I'm like, I'm Batman. The knee-jerk thing is to always have everybody, who are you? I'm Batman, because that's always the thing. For any superhero show or movie or whatever, it's always, I'm Batman. And it's not like, oh, I'm Daredevil. Like that doesn't really come into mind right away for him to just say here. Because he's not even the Double D suit. Double D, for you ladies out there, man, would that be sweet? A gender swapping Daredevil, I would love that. If we can get what would be the female equivalent? Would it be Mary Murdoch? Would people be okay with that? Considering it's Matt, it would have to be. Like, I think Mary would probably... Well, we've already had, like, Typhoon Mary, so that doesn't make sense. So, could be Madame Murdoch. That sounds weird. But I don't know. But we have also Madame Gao, so fuck! Like, what would be a good female name that actually makes sense without tying into any... we would probably have to go on and probably say we'll just come up with like some character that already exists and just saying that she's a Murdoch. That works. Just like, oh, it's Karen Murdoch. Come on, like, come up with something more interesting than that of a name. Mary Beth. No, I don't know. I'm wasting too much time. So Matilda. Still doesn't sound good. Still doesn't, like, roll off the tongue. Matilda Murdoch. Anyways, so we push on here. So Matt, of course, is to go on and try to nurse his wounds, because, of course, we always have the telltale signs that Matt is to go on and hurt people, because Foggy's to realize his knuckles is to always be, like, kind of mangled up. we had it before in the other Daredevil series, or in the Daredevil show, that Matt would go on and have supposedly boxing practice, and I guess that could always be his excuse for his like mangled up hands. But it always seems like now, like they're realizing it's like, oh no, you're not doing boxing practice. You're going on and beating people in the street because you're Daredevil. Because I guess Matt just no longer goes to this boxing gym and can justify his mangled knuckles anymore. So we go on, and we of course have Murdoch being so tempted to just like, man, I just want to toss on this Daredevil suit one more time, and just defend this city. But then all of a sudden, while he's going and opening up this case that has a suit in there, all of a sudden Foggy's on the line. He's like, hey buddy, how about we go for a drink? It's been a while. So we go on, and we have Foggy who's talking to Matt at this bar. And I'm like, how is it that these people can just go on and talk about anything at this bar and no one gives a like, you would have think somebody would have been like, hey, Matt Murdock's Daredevil. Yeah, I know. It's sweet, right? You would think someone would say something. That's just me in this bar, because it seems like they say whatever in this bar. So we go on, and we have Matt and Foggy, who's like, hey, it's been a while. It's like, well, yeah, it has been a while because Foggy is so busy going on and making this thing called money. Sadly enough, he's a sellout. No, it's like he would be basically doing the exact same job, but now it actually is to be this thing called having an outcome of a check at the end of the day. So he's doing his almost exact same work, but this time around, he ends up getting paid for it instead of being with Matt, where he is to eventually just slowly but surely kind of just lose everything by working with Matt, sadly enough. So, because there's only so many public defender gigs that they can do also. So we go on, and we of course have it to where Foggy is saying it's like, well, like I'm sure last night you were really tempted to just don the cape and cowl, so to speak, again, even though he doesn't roam around in a cape, but like it was really tempting for him to dust out those horns, and yeah, that's the better analogy here. And so Matt is like, well, hey, the cops weren't out, like I had to go and do something. And so Foggy's like, well, hey, I don't blame you. Like, it's okay. Like, if you want to go and, like, save your city. But you know what? How about this time around? How about I give you a number of cases to just kind of push off on you? It would be stuff that you would be doing anyways, but it's really just to keep you busy and, like, to just make you forget about scratching that old, horned itch, so to speak, that you are to be now more tempted to go and like just bury yourself in your work. And so Matt has this kind of very tempting thing of like, well, like this does sound like a really good offer. And so fortunately, we also have one Alexander Reed moment, which I'll get to by the end of the by the end of what I'm talking about here for Matt. So we'll cover that because I'm sure there was one thing that I have to go and stick my way out to just talk about here. So there's a reason why I said it that way. So we go on and, as if I was creative with words at any point in time in my life. So Matt goes on and he's like, this sounds like a really good offer, but we have this kind of like battling it out between, of course, still Matt and his soul about what he should really do. And so really going to have Matt come to him realize what he really wants, what he is to really want to accomplish here. and he at some point is going to be putting on a scarf to do so. So Alexander Reed is to go on by the end of this episode and is to meet up with an old friend who is to have a bag weirdly over his head. And that makes donut holes worth of any sense. Why this guy has to go on and have a bag over his head? Because he's blind anyways. Did they realize how moronic that was? But I guess it's like, well, hey, like, Stick has heightened senses, kind of like Matt does. So we really just have it to where I guess a bag over the head might dull some of those senses, or he can maybe take a whiff of something, or maybe he might hear something that tells him where he is, or maybe he might figure it out where exactly he is by some reason or another. So Stick is back, of course, because you don't kind of have a Daredevil Elektra show without Stick being involved. And so Stick is going to go on and kind of not only get this team together, but is to kind of like give them motivation to do what they are to need to do soon here. So really that kind of finishes up what's all going on with Matt, because the Jessica Jones thing was also tied with Matt. So I think that's all covered. So now let's go and let's cover Danny. So I'm covering Luke Cage's stuff last, weirdly, bizarrely, and whichever. But eventually there's a whole reason for that, because Danny's stuff is somewhat easy with the whole name of that whole sword thing going on, that I think I've technically already said it, but still. So, Danny. Danny, of course, is to go on and kind of think it out between him and Colleen Wing. I should just call her Wing, or Colleen. Like, I don't know why I have to pronounce her whole entire name, but I do that with everybody. So that's just the way it is. So we, of course, have Danny and Colleen here. We're coming up with the idea that, if anything, maybe it's time for them to figure out if they can go and team up with anybody. Because it seems that the Shaft guy from the first episode, it seems that he was to be their ally. And it seems that more and more there are some potential people still left around that they could team up with. And so it's like, well, that does sound like a good idea, but before we go on and do that, let's go and try to kind of hunt down the sword workshop manufacturing place that this guy Shaft was to get his sword from. So we go on and we have both Danny and Colleen figure out where this sword is. And so all of a sudden, Colleen is like, oh my god, I want to live here, because there's a number of swords that are all to be presented. And he's like, because Colleen, of course, is to be the sword girl. And we'll end up finding out in the second season of Iron Fist that she'll have a really interesting story for the second season. So definitely check out any number of things if I haven't spoiled them already. Or if everybody's like, oh yeah, I've seen all of that, it's okay, it's good. Like, I know where everybody heads. I've seen all the shows. And now I'm just coming back to just kind of see if you know all this stuff, which I don't. Especially the Jessica Jones stuff. There was stuff where I was like, how is it that I remember any of this stuff about Jessica Jones? Because I barely do. Because I rarely saw that show. Compared to anything else, in all honesty. I think the season 1 villain is Purple Man, right? The guy who is to be kind of like the Doctor Who looking who is to kind of control people. I remember that. But heaven forbid I know much else about that show. Because I wanted to watch it. I saw the pilot and I was like, wow, this episode is dark. This show is dark. So I was like, compared to every other show, I was like, I don't know about this one. So let's go on. So we go on here, and we, of course, have it to where all of a sudden they go on, they find out that this place that is to have this sword is to also have the Kung Lung symbol. And we just have to naturally assume here that probably Black Sky had came in here and killed all of these men, killed all of these people, and that were involved in Kung Lung, because I guess there was a New York branch, kind of like they're actually setting up franchises, I guess. Kung Lung, New York. All right, cool, great. Because they realized that Danny was heading to New York, so they're like, oh, okay, so let's go and let's help him. So all of a sudden, both Colleen and Danny are all of a sudden seeing this cleanup crew that was to be ushered in by a guy named White Hat to have them clean up all of this mess of this stuff by spraying down chemicals, which I'm assuming is either a lie, or not a lie, but like is the chemical lie. Because in like Breaking Bad, you have like one of the episodes in Breaking Bad where Pinkman is to go and dump a body in this tub, and he is to think, oh, well, I can just go and put these chemicals in this tub and get rid of this body. Well, the tub ends up decaying, and the body just starts falling through this bathtub, and we of course have Heisenberg's character. It's like, well, that's why you don't, like, you of course, everything that I'm to tell you to the exact specific nature, whatever. Heaven forbid I say words in English. So, like, it's the same thing here where we have, like, these guys who are dousing these people with chemicals, not quite sure exactly what it is. So, all of a sudden we have Danny grabbing one of these guys saying, who do you work for? This is kind of like Austin Powers, like, who does number 2 work for? As he's, like, dropping the guy into the toilet. He's like, blah, blah, blah. Who does number 2 work for? And so we, of course, have it to where this guy is just saying, like, hey, man, I'm the cleanup crew. Like, that's all I am. So I think this actually is to be Cole from the other episode. I think it's Cole from the other episode. I didn't really talk much about Misty Knight's superiors. Stryber, I don't think there was much as far as dialogue that I didn't already say in between both Misty and her superior here. I guess her new superior for the show, because she's doing a task force thing. So I guess she's getting a completely different boss from the actual Luke Cage show. So, so we all of a sudden have, of course, Danny questioning Cole here, which all of a sudden leads Luke Cage to get in the mix of things. And so now let's put a pin in that, and let's now cover the Luke Cage stuff, which I want to cover the Danny and Luke Cage, but I feel like really at the very end here, we're going to save the best for last. The battle, the fight. Oh my God. When I saw this the first time, I was like, yeah! Yeah! Like, this is the greatest part about the show. But then I realized there's something else coming on here between both Jessica and Murdoch. So there's kind of this, like, man, like, it's kind of weird because as a team, I don't like this team all together. Like, I like characters kind of like duoed up because there's a lot more comedy that comes out of that. There's a lot of fun coming out of that. And so on and so forth. It's just better. Like, I think they can write it better when there are fewer people involved in, like, in certain scenes. It just comes out better. Did I say better enough? So we go on, and so Luke Cage is to now desperately figure out, like, hey, where the bad guys at, so to speak. We of course have it to where Luke is going on and talking to Claire, and he's trying to ask her. It's like, well, hey, like in Harlem, like where is it that all the bad guys are at? Basically, like where's the hot spot? Where's the cool place to eventually find bad people? So, and we have it to where Luke Cage is thinking that he's going to go to a place called Elmore's, and Claire is just like, well, you know what? I've stitched up enough knife wounds to tell you that like that's not the hot spot anymore. That place is kind of dwindled down because we have Luke who's desperately trying to figure out and the whole Mariah story about kind of what's going on for his second season of Luke Cage. So Mariah and I think Shades, because those are going to be the next big bad, I think, for the next season. From what I remember, heaven forbid I know names right, but anyways. So so Claire is going on and saying, hey, the new hotspot is to be seemingly trouble in a paradise. So I guess it's trouble in paradise, but it's trouble in a paradise, weirdly is how they phrase it here. So Luke, of course, is to go on and he is to make it into this place, and immediately he is to, of course, find the one guy that is to basically be the Coulson of the Daredevil Netflix universe. We, of course, have it to where we are to have Luke bump into Turk Barrett here. Turk, of course, has been tied to any number of shows, but he's kind of this small-time thug, but they always come to him for information at some point. Like, funny enough, yeah, we can say that Claire is technically the Coulson of the Netflix universe, but I would much rather call Claire like the Nick Fury of this universe, and so like technically Turk is the Coulson because like he's a smaller role, but still like he's tied into all of these shows, whereas like Claire has actually been on missions and helped out Luke Cage at some point, and has gone on to also help out a number of people. Basically, all the time healed them from some kind of injury, illness, whichever. Like, I think at some point we had Luke who was uh, dying from some uh, dying from some injury where he needed to go off, and they had to figure out a way to uh, kind of dip him in acid to get this kind of thing from out of him. Like, was it a bullet? Was it a bullet? I'm trying to figure it out. Because I remember the Diamondback story, but it's fading away now. Like, so if Luke Cage is to be a thing that everybody wants me to review, I'll go back to it. Like, I would be happy to just cover Luke Cage or any number of these Netflix shows. I have no problem with that. I enjoy all of these shows. Even if it doesn't have the best season, the shows are always interesting. So, we go on here and we, of course, have it to where Luke is, of course, asking Turk questions about, like, hey, who's the new Cottonmouth, basically, who's the new big head cheese of a guy that is going on and having these guys, these carriers go off and do this business, like, who is this guy? And so Turk's like, I don't know, all they end up doing is just calling him the White Hat, like, that's all I know him by. And so he's like, well, good enough, as he kind of sprays him with this alcohol coming out of this keg. I'm sure kind of hurting his eyes, because if you think about it, there's a lot of times where guys, when they win some big la-di-da thing, they end up going and spraying champagne all over themselves, and they, of course, have goggles on their eyes and whatever for a reason, because it hurts their eyes. To where eventually you end up getting these guys who get all bloodshot and all whatever because their eyes are all effed up from all the champagne that got sprayed into their eyes for whatever reason. So I just had to help people understand like why getting sprayed with alcohol in someone's eye would be a horrible thing. If alcohol isn't a horrible thing to get sprayed in the face with, regardless. So, duh. So let's move on. So we go on and we have Luke go and find this place that Turk had talked about, and he's like, "Well, hey, like, if you're lying to me, like, when I come back here, you won't like me when I come back here." And Turk is like, "I don't like you now. You get out of here." So Luke Cage goes off and is to, of course, make it to this warehouse that the white hat, like this pimp guy, this, which I was like, man, like that's some sweet duds, buddy. Like I'm not offending him. I'm just saying, like, man, that actually is a pretty sweet outfit. I would never pull off all that kind of white, but like you go for it, buddy. So we have Luke who's calling Misty Knight and kind of saying like, hey, what's going on? And that he has a number of information kind of outing this whole white hat guy. But we have it to where Luke wants to go on and try to find Cole and convince him to kind of run out of here to kind of give him a head start. So Luke is trying to convince Cole to just try to like save himself. And so we have Luke going on and finding Cole because Danny is holding on to him. And now let's get to the really cool part. So now we, of course, have Danny that is desperately trying to fight Luke Cage, and he's using a lot of heavy impact moves at some point. Because they're not all heavy impact, because they look kind of weirdly like he's going like this. And it doesn't like really, it doesn't really look like he's absolutely, I don't know what it is. Like, it just kind of looks like he's just kind of going like this. And like, it's like, hey, I'm hurting you by going like this. And I'm like, what is it? But there's one time where we have kind of Danny kind of trying, and Luke is just there like, come on, like, what are you doing here? And so Luke is trying to kick, of course, Cage here, and Cage is to grab, of course, Danny's leg, and he's just kind of like, we just have Luke who's kind of mopping the floor with Danny, but Danny is still like, we applaud his effort here. We appreciate his effort because eventually here's the wind up and here's the pitch. So now, of course, we have Danny who's like, well, I've tried all my kind of heavy impact moves. So now I have to rely on my one big one punch move. And so Danny goes on and is to wind up his Iron Fist. And so we have, and I love how like there's so much close-up things going on here, where we of course have Danny like winding up the Iron Fist, and we have it where when Danny is to punch Luke, how you can see the impact of Luke's face, where it's like, whoa, like you end up seeing that close impact, and I love that. That is like a priceless imagery right chair. So we go on and we have Danny who punches Luke with the Iron Fist, and I think that ends up really legitimately taking out Luke here. And so like that's the kind of the big move that we end up seeing in this fight sequence. And so eventually we're going to see some more kind of aftermath of this whole scene in a later episode. But really what's to come out of this is that Luke Cage was technically knocked out. So, with that said, I think that covers most of this episode. And holy crap, it took me an hour to cover a 44-minute episode. What the fuck? Why did I take so long? Good God, I am sorry. So, I'm going to get freaking out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Whoa.